Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel, True Crime and Felines. For my returning subscribers, welcome back my feline friends. If you are new here, my name is Brandy, and every Friday I bring you a true crime case or mystery with one or more of my 14 felines. This week's case is of the mysterious Bennington Triangle in Vermont, where strange events and occurrences, including human disappearances, had happened. I haven't done a good mystery in a while, so I figure I would throw one in. So, let's get started. The Bennington Triangle is around the Glastonbury Mountain in Vermont, and it's within the Green Mountain National Forest. The place got its nickname from paranormal author Joseph Citro. He did a podcast in 1992 where he ended up calling it the Bennington Triangle, and the name just stuck. Now, Joseph Citro wrote several monster guides and paranormal guides and other books about the area, so check them out. I'll put the links in the description box below. They're very interesting. Now, the triangle includes the towns of Bennington, Woodford, and Shaftesbury, and then there are two ghost towns of Somerset and Glastonbury. Somerset and Glastonbury were logging towns in the early 19th century, but due to state legislature, they shut down and were unincorporated in 1937. So after that, the places just kind of fell into ruin. According to a 2010 census, Glastonbury had a whole 8 people living in it, and Somerset had 2. Now, besides having these ghost towns, this area around the mountain and on the mountain has been known for strange occurrences like UFO sightings and Bigfoot sightings and other strange creatures and paranormal. For centuries, people have reported strange lights in the sky, sounds that they couldn't explain, and even strange smells coming off the mountain. The first recorded sighting of a Bigfoot type creature was in the early 1800s. There was a stagecoach full of passengers that were headed down the road. They had to stop the coach because a road had washed out. It was nighttime and it had been raining. So the stagecoach stopped and the driver got down with his lantern to look around. What he noticed was some very large footprints in the mud that were too big to be a human's. Then suddenly everyone heard a loud roar and some sort of creature came running out of the woods. It was so big it was able to tip the stagecoach over on its side. Now, luckily nobody was hurt. The passengers stated all they saw was a pair of red eyes before the creature ran off into the forest. These sightings would continue for the next 2 centuries, with many witnesses stating that the creature was hairy and stood over 6 feet tall. It got nicknamed the Bennington Monster. According to Native American lore, they considered the mountain cursed and actually avoided the area altogether, only using it to bury their dead. They had several stories of strange beasts in the forest, and they labeled it where the 4 winds met. The Native American Algonquin tribe had a legend where it warned of a malevolent stone in the mountain that would open up and devour anybody unlucky enough to stand on top of it. There have been many stories about several people going missing in the area throughout the century, and we're going to focus on a few of those today. We're going to start in 1943. A man named Carl Herrick was hunting about 10 miles northeast of Glastonbury, and he never returned home. His body would be discovered 3 days later. His brother told witnesses that surrounding Carl's body were these very large footprints. Carl's cause of death looked as if he was crushed to death, like someone picked him up and squeezed him till his bones broke. In November of 1945, there was a 74-year-old man named Middle Rivers, and he was a hunting guide that knew the area very well. Rivers was leading a party of 4 hunters around the Hell Hollow area, which is just southwest of Glastonbury. The hunting party had decided to call it a day, so Rivers was leading them back to their camp. Rivers somehow got too far ahead of them and they lost sight of him. However, the hunters were able to find their way back to camp, so they just buckled in for the night and waited for Rivers to return. They weren't concerned about Rivers because he was a skilled woodsman and knew the area very well, but the next day, when Rivers still didn't show up, they decided to tell someone. Rivers was a well-known and respected man around the area, so there were 300 volunteers that stepped up to go search for him. There were even Army soldiers from the Massachusetts Fort Devens that wanted to join the search as well. After 8 days of searching all day and some into the night, Rivers was never found. The only thing that was found was a single rifle cartridge that Rivers used in his gun by a stream. They guessed that when Rivers bent over to drink from the stream, it may have fallen out of his pocket. Now, people hoped he would resurface, but as the years went by, nobody ever knew what happened to him. One of the more famous cases was a college student named Paula Weldon. On December 1st of 1946, she decided to go hiking for the day a long trail. Paula was an 18-year-old sophomore at Bennington College, and she was an avid hiker. Around 2:30 p.m., a store employee had seen her as she had asked for directions on how to get to Long Trail. She made it to the trail, and there was also an elderly couple on the trail as well, and they stated that they were about 100 yards behind her for most of the way, and then she turned a corner and they never saw her again. Around 4 p.m., another hiker stated that he came across Paula as well because she had stopped him and asked how far the trail went, and the hiker told her that the trail went all the way up to Canada. She thanked him and continued on, and that was the last time Paula was seen. The next morning, when she didn't show up for her college classes, a search began. This search was extensive. It involved more than 1,000 people, police, firefighters, even aircraft surveillance, and the FBI was even involved. There was a $5,000 reward offered to any information leading to the whereabouts of Paula. Some believe that Paula wasn't quite dressed for the weather at the time and may have gotten lost and succumbed to the elements of the Vermont winter. Of course, others believe that it was foul play and she just came across the wrong person. Other theories are out there that she became a recluse and just started living in the wilderness. And again, another theory was that she went all the way up to Canada and started a new life. Regardless of all of this effort and theories, Paula's body nor her whereabouts were ever found. Exactly 3 years later, on December 1st, 1949, a man named James Tetford went missing. Now this one is a little weirder than the rest. So James was a 60-year-old veteran who lived in Bennington at the soldiers' home. He had been visiting family and he was returning home on a bus. Now witnesses stated that they saw James napping in his seat after the last stop before hitting Bennington. However, when the bus got to Bennington, James was gone, meaning he had to have disappeared between the last stop and Bennington while the bus was still moving. His luggage was still found on the bus, and in his seat where he was sitting was just an open timetable of the bus schedule. No one saw him get off the bus, so they waited it out and hoped he would come back to the soldiers' home, but he never did. The disappearance was investigated, but with nothing to go on, and there wasn't much they could do. James was never heard from again. In October of 1950, the youngest Bennington Triangle victim disappeared. Paul Jebsen was only 8 years old. Paul was with his mother as they drove to a farm or a dump where she was attending to some pigs. She told Paul to stay in the cab of the truck and she would be back shortly. She said that she was gone for about an hour, and when she got back, Paul was not in the truck. She frantically searched around the immediate area, calling his name, but never found him, so she alerted authorities. Again, hundreds of people would volunteer to search for Paul, and they even brought in bloodhounds. The bloodhounds picked up Paul's scent from the truck and headed toward Glastonbury Mountain. However, they lost the scent once they hit the highway, which many thought that maybe poor Paul was abducted by a passing motorist. Paul's father had stated that Paul had been talking about visiting Glastonbury Mountain for several days, so the mountain was searched as well. After several days of searching, no trace of Paul was ever found. Now, a short 16 days later after Paul went missing, a lady named Frida Langer went missing. Frida was 53 years old, and she was camping with friends and family near Glastonbury Mountain at the Somerset Reservoir. Frida and her cousin decided to take a hike one morning. As they set off, they were only a few hundred yards from their campsite when Frida slipped and fell and landed in a stream. Her clothes and shoes were soaked. She asked her cousin to please wait while she ran back to camp to change. Her cousin waited, and after some time, he was wondering what was taking her so long. So he decided to walk the few hundred yards back to camp and check on her. When he got back to camp, he realized Frida never made it back to the camp. Nobody had seen her and still thought they were out on their hike. Frida somehow disappeared in broad daylight and only a short distance from people. In the next several weeks, there were 400 people, aircrafts, police, and soldiers that would search and, of course, find nothing. Then, in May of 1951, 7 months after Frida's disappearance, a hiker stumbled upon a body near Somerset Reservoir. They determined that was the body of Frida Langer, but that area had been searched extensively for several days, and it wasn't like she was buried or under grass or behind a rock. She was just out in the open. Unfortunately, her body was in such a decomposition state that they were unable to determine what her cause of death was. Now, there are plenty of other stories of people going missing, not just what I've covered today. There's a story of a husband and wife who were driving down the the highway, and the husband pulled over to clean off his windshield. The wife got out of the car as well to go clean off the back windshield. When the husband had finished, he had called for his wife, and she was gone. He looked around the area, couldn't find her, and again, after several days of searching, she was never found. And there were also many hunters and fishermen that went missing over the years as well. Now, besides the geographic area and some of the time period of when this happened, no other direct connections have been made to tie these disappearances or cases together. Now, between 1945 and 1950, some say that it was the work of a serial killer, which could be a possibility. Others say that it is completely paranormal, that this area is like a window into a wormhole or another dimension, and that is why these people are disappearing with no trace. Others believe in the Native American legends that the place is just cursed and you never know who its next victim will be. Now, in October of 2008, 27-year-old Robert Singley had actually got lost in the triangle and lived to tell his tale. Now, Robert was an avid hiker and knew the area well as he hiked it several times. But this time, things went differently. So Robert's story is that he decided to go for a hike to Bald Mountain where he ate his lunch. Robert stated after eating his lunch and hanging out in the nature for a while, he decided to head back to his car some 3 miles to the east of where he was at. After walking what he felt was 3 miles, he started wondering if he was on the right trail. He said that's when a fog rolled in and it started getting dark, so he was actually walking a lot longer than he thought he was. Robert had no GPS, compass, or map on him. He didn't even have a cell phone. He left it in the car. But he knew the area, so he didn't felt he needed anything like that. Being the experienced hiker he was, Robert found a large maple tree and camped out underneath it. He stated the maple tree had a weird, haunting energy to it. Eventually ended up making a fire and waiting out the cold until morning. He stated that the night was eerily quiet, that the only sounds of the forest that he heard were the trees swaying in the wind and loons calling in the way distance. At first light, Robert headed in the direction that he thought his car was in. He said after 3 or 4 miles of walking again, he reached a sign that he was actually near Goddard Shelter, which is actually almost at the peak of Glastonbury Mountain. He was in the opposite direction of where he thought he was going. He thought when he took shelter under the maple that he was only a quarter mile or so away from where he parked his car. But when he woke up, he was actually 6 or 7 miles away from where he thought he was. So he turned around and trekked back the other way. He said he ended up passing the maple that he camped under, but he stated the trail seemed foreign to him all of a sudden, that there were downed trees and unfamiliar rocks, stuff that he couldn't have missed the night before, and just thought it was strange. Now, when he had camped out for the night, his fiancée became worried and actually called the authorities and reported him missing. However, the police wouldn't start their search till daylight because of the heavy fog and weather conditions. Robert stated that he kept walking and he thought he knew where he was going, but he was just walking forever and never seemed to come across anything he recognized. He thought he would never find his car, and it was about 11:30 a.m. when he finally was found by a Vermont police officer who helped him get back to where he needed to be. But Robert stated he was still a ways from his car, and this all did not make any sense to him. Now, the trails that go up to Glastonbury Mountain kind of stop halfway, and then it's more of a more tedious hike to get to the peak. And some say that the trails stop halfway for a reason, that you shouldn't go up any further. Locals would also state that when you walk into the forest of Glastonbury Mountain, that you don't hear anything like birds chirping or animals scurrying, that it's eerily quiet, like Robert stated, almost like even animals don't want to venture in that area. There is also a local legend that wearing red or crimson is kind of bad juju for the area, because Paula, the college student, and Paul, the 8-year-old, were both wearing red when they disappeared. Now, there are other people, of course, that lived in the area all their lives, and they don't believe any of this stuff. They state that the area is just, it's a forest. It's so vast, it's so large, and they're actually surprised more people don't go missing more often. Now, experts that have studied the area state that it is unstable with its wind patterns and weather, and that in the wrong time it becomes chaotic in a way and confusing, and people easily get turned around and lost in these conditions, even those that know the area really well. This area has been compared to another triangle in Massachusetts as well, which I may cover at another time. Now, what do you think happened to these people? Do you believe in the paranormal, Bigfoot, or a man-eating stone? Would you go hiking there? And if so, would you wear red while you were doing it? What are your thoughts on this mystery? I would love to know what you think in the comments down below. If you would like to become a feline friend, please hit that subscribe button, and we will be back next Friday with another true crime case or mystery. Thanks, guys. See you later.